He was a comic genius who had only one speed setting, and that was full throttle. From the moment he burst into our lives as an alien on Happy Days, he amazed us with his range of talent. It utterly left us breathless. Yet, behind the manic shtick of Robin Williams was a man who was deeply plagued by depression. He had other demons, such as alcohol and cocaine as well. Still, he kept us entertained to the very end, which made it all the more unfathomable to his legion of fans and admirers when he took his life at the age of just 63. In today's Biographics, we intend to get the essence of the real Robin Williams. Robin McLaurin Williams came into the world on July the 21st, 1951. Born at St. Luke's Hospital in Chicago, Illinois, he was the only child of Laurie and Robert Williams. The family was wealthy, with Robert being a senior executive at the Ford Motor Company. Laurie was a former model and a part-time actress. Much of Robin's formative years were spent alone in the huge mansion that was his home. In order to cope with his loneliness, he created characters and conversations in his head. He was an overweight child, which led to bullying at school. The 6th grade, he later recalled, was the most difficult year of his life. Many days he went home crying after constant name-calling and physical harassment. Each day was torment for him, with his only friends being the ones he created in his own imagination. These difficult early years, they brought on a depression that Robin was to grapple with for the rest of his life. Robin began by using comedy as a defense mechanism. It started with his mother. Laurie had a very sharp wit and would often use humor laced with sarcasm to communicate with her son. In order to connect with her, Robin had to make his mother laugh. It wasn't good enough to be Robin. He had to be funny Robin. By the time he was 16, the family had relocated to California, where Robin attended Redwood High School. It was the late 60s, and the straight-laced Robin found himself in the middle of a counterculture that revolved around drugs and sex. He was able to loosen up, and after dabbling with marijuana, found himself fitting in for the first time. It was at Redwood High that Robin stumbled upon the drama department. He had already perfected his comedic veneer, quickly establishing a reputation as the class clown. He fell totally in love with the idea of improv performance, his comedic personality slowly emerging through drama classes. At the same time, Robin got involved in wrestling and soccer, proving to be an accomplished athlete. But by the time he graduated in 1969, he was voted by his classmates as least likely to succeed. Not surprisingly, though, he was also voted funniest student. After graduating, he attended Claremont Men's College. His sights, they were set on a career in political science. Before long, however, he was spending more time in the college theatre than he was in lecture rooms. He won the coveted role of Fagin in the college's production of Oliver, turning in a stellar performance that made it clear that he was destined for the limelight. Leaving behind his diplomatic ambitions, Robin involved in a community college theatre program. During classes, he would often improvise, leaving his classmates and teachers in fits of laughter. After 3 years of honing his craft, he was offered the opportunity of a lifetime: full scholarship to the Juilliard School of Performing Arts in New York City. Robin was one of only 2 students accepted into the 1973 advanced program at Juilliard. The other, well, that was future Superman actor Christopher Reeve. Reeve, who had become a close friend, recalled his first impressions upon meeting Williams. He wore tie-dye shirts with tracksuit bottoms and talked a mile a minute. I'd never seen so much energy contained in one person. He was like an untied balloon that had been inflated and immediately released. I watched in awe as he virtually caromed off the walls of the class and hallways. To say that he was on would be a major understatement. At Juilliard, well, Robin, he astounded his teachers and fellow students alike. He was able to take on a persona of characters with ease, trading out one accent or dialect for another like he was born to do it. However, Robin, he was frustrated at Juilliard. He just didn't fit in. After 2 years, his teachers told him that there was nothing more that they could teach him. One of his instructors considered Robin to be a genius who was not being properly served by the school's conservative and classical training style. He left Juilliard in 1976 to launch himself onto the world. His first stop was the stand-up circuit on the West Coast. Robin's first break into the realms of comedy came at a club in the San Francisco Bay Area. His first gig was at the Holy City Zoo, where he also spent time tending bar. These early sets, they were frantic, bordering on psychotic. No one had ever seen anything quite like Robin Williams. He played a collection of rather edgy characters, including Reverend Oral Satisfaction. His early stand-up was influenced by the likes of Lenny Bruce, Peter Sellers, and Jonathan Winters. His manic edge, quick-fire ad-lib routines, and off-the-wall physical comedy proved an absolute hit, and he soon established a loyal following. Robin loved the immediate feedback that came with stand-up comedy, and it was something that he would continue right through his career. Despite the apparent ease of his performances, he actually found stand-up incredibly stressful. Underneath the cloak of his act, he was an intensely shy man. He once said that he started using drugs and alcohol as a crutch to combat stage nerves. In 1977, Williams moved to Los Angeles, where he began performing at the Comedy Club. It was here that he was discovered by TV producer George Schlatter, who offered him a spot in a revival of the old 60s show, Laugh-In. Now the show, well, it ultimately didn't survive, but for Williams, it established a foothold into a career in television. He became a semi-regular cast member on The Richard Pryor Show, while also continuing to perform stand-up. It was an appearance on The Richard Pryor Show that brought Williams to the attention of Gary Marshall, the producer of the hit sitcom Happy Days. After 5 years, the scriptwriters, well, they were running out of ideas, though they hadn't yet jumped the shark. They decided to do an episode taking off the 1960s sci-fi comedy My Favorite Martian. The episode, well, it was called My Favorite Orcan, and it called for the casting of an actor to play an alien from the land of Orc. Marshall thought that Williams might be the man for the job. In what has gone down as possibly the most brilliant audition in TV history, Robin entered the room and immediately sat in the chair on his head. He continued to do his lines and then broke into an inspired ad-lib. Marshall cast him on the spot, later commenting that Williams was the only alien who turned up for the part. The episode of Happy Days, it was originally shot as a dream sequence on the part of Richie Cunningham. However, the character played by Williams, Mork from Orc, was such a hit with the TV-watching audience after an initial broadcast that the ending was refilmed so that Mork was a real character. Much of Robin's work on the Happy Days episode was improvised and augmented with physical comedy. Audiences couldn't get enough of the zany alien and demanded much more. This led to the creation of the spin-off series Mork and Mindy, which ran from 1978 to 1982. The show catapulted Williams to absolute stardom literally overnight. After just 2 weeks on the air, it had zoomed to the top 10 of the Nielsen ratings. The producers of the show, they kept the script loose enough to give Robin plenty of room to do as he pleased, and the results were unpredictable, over the top, and hilarious. While the critics, they weren't overly enthused with the show, they were absolutely falling over themselves to lavish praise upon its star. Mork and Mindy, it quickly became a pop culture phenomenon. A generation of kids took to wearing Mork's trademark rainbow suspenders and greeting their friends with the words "Nanu Nanu." Robin went from relative obscurity to instant fame in the space of a couple of months. It was something that he was entirely unprepared for, and unfortunately it led to him indulging in the excesses that come with fame: drugs, alcohol, and women. Just like he acted in the fast lane, he also lived his life in the fastest of fast lanes. He quickly slipped into the habit of partying into the early hours, crawling home at 5 in the morning, and then having to be on set by 10 a.m. There is no doubt, though, that Robin, he was blessed with more physical energy than most. Inevitably, however, that energy began to burn out. He would sometimes fall asleep on the set, or just sit dormant in off mode. One night, after performing a late-night set at a comedy club, Robin met up with fellow comic John Belushi. They ended up at the Chateau Marmont, where Robin shared some of Belushi's cocaine, and then left. The next day, on the set of Mork and Mindy, co-star Pam Dawber broke the news to Williams that Belushi had died of a drug overdose. The news, well, that shocked him into making significant changes in his lifestyle. The death of Belushi tarnished the image of Hollywood's fastest-living brat pack. Robin was called to testify before a grand jury, an experience which, along with the shock of Belushi's death and the birth of his first child, Zach, allowed him to break free from the stranglehold of drugs and alcohol. It was at this time that he discovered cycling, a form of exercise which he credits for saving his life. After 4 years, Mork and Mindy had lost its Midas touch. Producers tried whatever they could to resurrect the initial appeal, but nothing seemed to work. They decided to make Mork less naive, allowing Williams to work in more of his nightclub act material. Interestingly, the Mork character also found its way into his stand-up routines, though not by Robin's design. Audience members at late-night shows would simply yell out, "Do Mork!" To which Robin would frustratingly respond, "Mork's not here. I'm a different guy." By the middle of 1982, though, the character that had propelled Williams to superstar status was beginning to feel like a millstone around his neck. So it came as somewhat of a relief to him when Mork and Mindy was cancelled after 4 seasons. In 1976, Robin met Valerie Velarde while working as a bartender in San Francisco shortly after leaving Juilliard. She was a dancer, having studied at Juilliard herself. They began a relationship and, after 2 years, were married on June 4, 1978. Valerie, she endured her husband's cocaine addiction and wild partying lifestyle for a number of years. As we mentioned, though, among other things, it was the birth of his son Zachary on April 11, 1983 that led him to finally shake off his addictions. However, there was one thing that he was not able to control, and that was his wandering eye. He ended up having an affair with a cocktail waitress by the name of Michelle Tish Carter. Then, in 1986, Miss Carter sued Williams for $6.4 million, claiming that he had knowingly infected her with herpes simplex virus. He settled out of court, only for his wife to sue for divorce a few months later. On April 30, 1989, less than a year after his divorce from Valerie being finalized, Williams married Marcia Grimes, the former nanny to his son Zach. They had actually been carrying on an affair during the last 2 years of his previous marriage. At the time of the wedding, Marcia was pregnant with Robin's child, a daughter who they named Zelda Ray. 2 years later, they had a second child, Cody Allen. The marriage, it lasted 19 years, but Marcia finally left after she realized she wasn't able to handle Robin's relapse into addiction. Williams, he married for the third and final time in 2011. This was to Susan Schneider, who was a graphic designer at the time. He met her while recovering from a heart operation in 2009. They were still together at the time of his death in 2014. Robin's fame on the small screen, it inevitably aroused the interests of movie makers. His first starring role came in 1980's Popeye. The movie, though, it was a financial and critical flop, and it looked like Williams's film career was over before it had really gotten started. But then in 1982's The World According to Garp, he was able to show more of his dramatic acting talents. The film, it was well received, with critic Roger Ebert calling Robin's performance unconventional and absorbing. Following a couple of smaller roles, he got his big screen break in 1987's Good Morning Vietnam. This role was Adrian Cronauer, a real-life armed forces DJ stationed in Saigon during the war. It was tailor-made for Williams's manic style. In fact, nearly everything that he did on screen was totally improvised. The performance, it was good enough to earn him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. Over the next decade, Williams appeared in an impressive number of films, displaying a huge range and appeal across the generations. He shone as both a dramatic and a comic actor, with his first and only Oscar coming for Best Supporting Actor, playing a psychologist in 1997's Good Will Hunting. He had previously received 2 nominations for 1988's Dead Poets Society and 1991's The Fisher King. Perhaps Williams's most versatile role was one in which he never actually was on screen, though. It was his role as the genie in the 1992 Disney animated musical Aladdin. The role had been specifically written for him, although he improvised much of the dialogue, just as he had done in Good Morning Vietnam. Williams went on to play what would be his most beloved character in 1993's Mrs. Doubtfire. In this movie, he portrayed a recently divorced actor who takes on the persona of an elderly Scottish housemaid to get closer to his children. He spent 4 hours every day putting on his makeup to play the part. Well, the movie, it was a great success, and a sequel was actually in the works at the time of Williams's death in 2014. His darkest role, it came in 2002's 1 Hour Photo. Williams played a lonely photo technician who becomes obsessed with a family whose photos he has developed for years. He received rave reviews from such esteemed critics as Leonard Maltin and Roger Ebert. Robin's last appearance on the big screen was in 2014's Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb, in which he reprised his role as President Theodore Roosevelt. In the 2015 film Absolutely Anything, he provided the voice of Dennis the Dog. It closed out a 38-year career that encompassed 74 movies. In 1966, together with fellow celebrity Whoopi Goldberg and Billy Crystal, Robin founded Comic Relief USA. The charity helped the homeless, with $80 million being raised as of last year. Together with his second wife, he also created the Windfall Foundation to help donate money to a variety of causes, including St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. On May 27, 1955, Robin's close friend Christopher Reeve was thrown from a horse and paralyzed. Robin dropped everything and rushed to be at his bedside. He turned up in full costume as a crazed Russian doctor, giving Reeve the first laugh since his tragic accident. Robin would go on to donate huge sums to research into spinal cord injury. When Reeves died in 2004, Robin was absolutely devastated. Williams was also passionate about supporting the military. He traveled and performed at many bases around the globe, and he was well known as a modern-day Bob Hope. During his career, he entertained over 100,000 troops in 13 countries. Williams managed to quit alcohol and cocaine in the early 1980s. However, in 2003, he lapsed back into alcohol abuse while working on the movie The Big White on location in Alaska. For the next 3 years, he denied that he had a problem. Finally, he was confronted by family and friends who convinced him to check himself into a substance abuse rehabilitation center in Newberg, Oregon. There, he finally admitted that he was an alcoholic. After 60 days in rehab, rather than returning to his family, Robin began living with a sober companion who was charged with ensuring that he didn't relapse. It was shortly after that his wife, Marcia, left him. A depressed Robin did what he always did to get by when life got tough. He threw himself into his work, going on tour to do stand-up. But unfortunately, in the middle of this tour, it was discovered that he needed heart surgery. The operation, it went well, but it required quiet rest in order to recuperate. This forced time of inactivity allowed the demons in his head to have free rein. Williams's addictive personality led to marathon cycling and video gaming sessions. Cycling was a healthy obsession for him, but for a man who struggled with depression his whole life, being alone in a room with a computer was very dangerous. Shortly after this, he began drinking again, and this time, he didn't care who knew. In May of 2014, Williams's new TV show, The Crazy Ones, was cancelled after just 1 season. In July, he was back in rehab. It was around that time that he also learned that he had Parkinson's disease. After his death, it was discovered that what had been diagnosed as Parkinson's was actually Lewy body dementia. After his death, Robin's wife, Susan, revealed that Robin had been having severe and prolonged episodes of fear and anxiety, insomnia, constipation, stress, and hand tremors that had been going on for over a year. She said that he would constantly tell her, "I just want to reboot my brain." On August 11th, 2014, Robin Williams committed suicide by hanging himself with a belt. He died from asphyxiation. His wife Susan stated that he was killed by the terrorist inside my husband's brain. Within hours of the tragic news of his passing, thousands of fans were posting images of themselves standing on their desks with the caption, "Oh Captain, my Captain," in reference to Robin's character in Dead Poets Society. It was a fitting tribute and a beautiful standoff to this brilliant man. So I really hope you found that video interesting and inspiring. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe. We've got brand new videos on this channel, biographies of all sorts of people from history, whether Robin Williams to all sorts of different things, from politicians, serial killers, business people, running the gamut. Anyway, you can check out some more of those that are over there on the right, and don't forget to subscribe. And thank you for watching.